Somewhere beneath the earth of old Oyo, a god lay in chains, and no one in the kingdom knew it. For 16 years, the rains had failed. For 16 years, the rivers thinned to mud, and the granaries emptied one by one. The people prayed to every Orisha they knew, and still the sky stayed dry, and still the crops turned to dust in their hands. What they did not know, what they could not have known, was that the god of creation himself was rotting in a farmer's hut, mistaken for a common thief, forgotten by the very kingdom that owed him its existence. This is the story of Obatala, the god who shaped humankind from clay, and the king who caged him. Long before the drought, Obatala was known across the Yoruba world as the calmest of all the Orishas. He wore only white cloth, white beads, white chalk pressed into his skin, because white held no stain, no violence, no war. He was patience given form. Where Sango burned with wrath, Obatala moved with stillness. Where Ogun cut through the world with iron, Obatala shaped it gently, with his hands, out of soft clay. It was Obatala who molded the first human bodies at the command of Olodumare, breathing form into flesh before any soul had walked the earth. But even a god of patience carries pride, and pride, in the old stories, is never left untested. One season, word reached Iluvif that Sango, the Thunder King of Oyo, was holding a great feast in his palace, a gathering of kings, priests, and Orishas from across the land. Obatala decided he would go himself, alone, without escort, without warning, dressed in nothing but his sacred white cloth, to see his old friend and be honored among mortals as a traveling elder, rather than a god arriving in glory. It was a decision that would cost him 16 years of his existence. On the road to Oyo, Esu was watching. Esu, the trickster at every crossroads, the one who tests what other gods believe about themselves. He saw Obatala walking in plain white, unguarded, unannounced, and he could not resist bending fate around him. As Obatala passed a bend in the road where palm wine sellers rested their calabashes in the shade, Esu stirred the air just enough to tip one over, and the wine spilled across the white cloth of a god who had never once been stained in his long existence. Furious at himself, ashamed of the mark on his sacred garment, Obatala did not turn back to change. Pride told him to keep walking, and so he arrived at the edge of Oyo's farmland, looking like nothing more than a filthy, wine-soaked traveler, muttering to himself on a lonely road, far from the grandeur his name deserved. That was when the guards found him. They did not see a god. They saw a vagrant, disheveled and suspicious, wandering too close to the royal farms on the eve of Sango's feast. When Obatala refused to explain himself, refusing, out of wounded pride, to announce who he truly was, the guards dragged him before a local chief, a minor king eager to prove his vigilance before the greater king he served. Without trial, without mercy, the chief ordered the stranger thrown into a mud-walled prison meant for thieves and debtors. Obatala said nothing. He let them chain him. He let the door close on him. In his own silent way, he chose to let his pride be punished by the very humility he had always preached to others. But the world does not forget when a god is wronged. Within a year, the rains over that region began to fail. The farmers who once boasted the richest soil in Oyo watched their yams shrivel in the ground. Wells that had run for generations turned to cracked clay. Children grew thin. Elders whispered that something ancient had been offended, though none could name what. Even Sango, powerful as he was, could summon no storm strong enough to break the drought, because the very god of creation, the source from which all living form descended, sat forgotten in a cell less than a day's walk from his throne. Season after season, the punishment deepened. Livestock died standing in dry fields. Disease crept through villages weakened by hunger. Mothers buried children too small to survive a famine that made no sense in a kingdom otherwise blessed by the gods. And still, in his prison, Obatala said nothing. He simply waited, wrapped in the wine-stained cloth he had once been so ashamed of, watching the seasons turn through a single barred window. It was Orunmila, keeper of Ifa, master of divination, who finally uncovered the truth. Summoned by a desperate Sango to explain why the land itself seemed to be dying, Orunmila cast the sacred palm nuts again and again, each pattern pointing to the same impossible answer. A great being, wronged and imprisoned, held captive somewhere within the kingdom's own borders. Not a curse from an enemy, not the anger of a rival Orisha. A god, forgotten by his own people, suffering in silence for the sin of pride mixed with the sin of blindness. Sango could not believe it. He sent riders across every district of Oyo, ordering every prisoner, every debtor, every unnamed captive to be brought before him. Chief after chief presented their prisoners. None of them were him. 16 years passed this way, search after search, drought after drought, until finally, in a small farming settlement at the edge of the kingdom, a local chief remembered the strange, silent traveler he had locked away so long ago, the one who had never once cried out, never once begged for release. On a hunch born of desperation, he sent word to the palace. When the doors of that mud prison finally opened, what walked out was no longer recognizable as the god who had entered it. Obatala's white cloth had long since turned the color of the earth around him. His hair had grown wild, his body was thin from years of quiet endurance, and yet his presence, the moment the light touched him, was unmistakable. The same stillness, the same terrible calm, the same authority that no chain could ever truly hold. Sango himself rode out to meet him, dismounting before his own people, kneeling in the dirt before the god he had failed to protect. The chief who had imprisoned him fell to his knees as well, certain his death was near, certain that a god so gravely wronged would demand blood for blood, 16 years for 16 years. But Obatala did not demand vengeance. He asked only for water, for cloth, for a place to sit in silence and let the sun warm skin that had not felt true daylight in 16 years. When Sango begged him to name a punishment for the kingdom, for the chief, for the guards who had thrown a god into chains without asking his name, Obatala answered with the same patience that had defined him since the beginning of the world. He forgave them, not because the wrong was small, not because 16 years of famine and grief could be undone with a few gentle words. He forgave them because vengeance was never his nature, even after everything taken from him. And the moment his forgiveness was spoken aloud, the sky over Oyo broke open for the first time in 16 years. Rain fell in sheets across fields that had forgotten what rain even was. Rivers filled. Children who had never once seen a full harvest watched the land turn green before their eyes. From that day forward, no shrine to Obatala was ever built without white cloth, without pure water, without an offering laid down in complete silence, a reminder of what he endured, and of what he chose not to become despite it. The lesson traveled further than Oyo. It spread through every Yoruba village that came to know his story, that pride can blind even a god long enough to be chained by ordinary men, that a whole kingdom can starve for the sin of not truly seeing the stranger in front of them, and that the deepest strength is not the storm that destroys, but the stillness that endures the storm and forgives it anyway. To this day, when the rains come late and the elders grow uneasy, some still whisper the old warning passed down through generations: look closely at every stranger on the road, wrapped in white, silent and unassuming, for you may be looking at the very God who shaped you from clay, and you may not get 16 years to make it right.